So I want to talk about today's experience with finding Hummus the movie. I was looking online for some fun films about Israel or Jewish themes, and I found Hummus the movie. And I asked my husband, would you sit down with me and watch this film? Let's check it out. And we watched it one evening early in quarantine days, you know, when it was still a novel concept long ago. And we enjoyed it so much. And the light-hearted feeling it gave us, the feeling, the essence of escape from the reality or escape from New Jersey was so refreshing that I just had to hunt for the director. And hunt I did, and I found Oren Rosenfeld, and I'm so grateful that he agreed to come be with our community and help us learn more about his experience making this film, as well as the Real Fauda, the BBC documentary about the show I'm sure you've all been binging on. We're going to discuss, so that you know what's happening in what order, we're going to discuss Hummus the movie first, and then the Real Fauda. I will also give you a spoiler alert that the Real Fauda conversation may have some, the film itself also has spoiler alerts for season 2. So, but we wrote that in all of our communications, so we hope no one will be too disappointed if they get that. So as I turn over to Oren, I welcome Oren Rosenfeld, live from Israel, coming to us. And Oren, tell us, how is life in Israel these days?
Hi, well, hi everyone. Thank you for joining us. It's actually a few, one very familiar face, Dvorah. Hi, I recognized you there and saw you. Israel today is actually going back to, I'd say, almost normal. The bars open, the restaurants, the beach, and swimming pools. Kids are back to school. Everything is almost back to normal. You have to wear a mask when you go into public transport or into an area that has, you know, a school or a kindergarten. But other than that, it seems that things are almost back to normal completely here, and it's really good. I mean, the only thing we're still missing is tourists and flights and hotels, but that's about it at the moment.
Right, and tourism is a huge part of Israel's economy, so that's not saying nothing.
Yeah, to see the hotels in Tel Aviv with no lights on, or like, you know, I was the other day looking at the Hilton Hotel, which is usually full of lights at night, and there were like 3 lights in the whole hotel. It was very eerie and kind of hit home. Also, the beaches and the streets, they're not, you know, as we're used to seeing them, but hopefully in 2-3 weeks, the flights will resume without having to quarantine for 2 weeks on arrival, and we'd forget this ever happened, hopefully.
That would be nice. So as everyone can hear, your English is fantastic. I know you were born and raised in Israel, so what's your secret sauce?
Well, my mother was born in Brooklyn and grew up in Connecticut, and she made Aliyah just before her 18th birthday and went to B'Tzalel Art School in Jerusalem. And I was very fortunate for her to speak English to me as I was growing up, and I try and do the same with my children, and hence the English.
It's fantastic and makes it really easy for us all to understand you. So we're grateful to you and your mom.
I'm grateful to her as well.
So let's talk about your work as a documentary filmmaker, photojournalist, and film producer. In all of these capacities, you've had the opportunity to travel the world. And I know from personal experience, travel can be life-changing. And I'd love to know what impact traveling has had on your life.
Israel is like an island, if you think about it, where the only way in and out is by plane. We're surrounded by countries that don't necessarily like us. So leaving Israel and traveling is something very, it's part of, it's not like in America you can meet people that never left America. But in Israel, I think almost everybody travels out, and I'm very fortunate to do that quite a few times a year, and because of my work and seeing other cultures and all this travel just makes me appreciate Israel much more and where I live. I mean, I see like Tel Aviv, for instance, and I'm not being, extra Zionist here or whatever, doing hasbara, but this is really the way I feel from traveling a lot, is that Tel Aviv just took the best of everywhere in the world and put it in one place. Best beaches, best food, best culture. It's safe. The weather's perfect. So that's one thing I brought back with my travels, is always missing Israel and home. And many adventures, many very touching and moving experiences. One I can tell you about because one of our viewers here, Dvora, me and her traveled to Goa, India recently. I was there 2 years ago, a little bit more, filming a documentary when the documentary is called Lost in Paradise. You could see it online. It's a short documentary, 15 minutes. And in this documentary, I was following a Chabad rabbi in Goa in an attempt to find a location to open a Chabad house. But as I was filming, we got word that a Jew has drowned, and the whole movie shifted, and Devorah is the mother of that Jew. His name is Chaim Kasnet, and I was there throughout the process of bringing him back to Israel for burial. Very emotional as I was there, and much more emotional 2-3 months ago when we went back together to Goa and traced back where it all happened. And so bringing us back to your question, travel for me is a major part of my life, and I can't do without it. And being in quarantine now is not easy. So I'm praying for flights to resume and for more experiences to happen for me as a filmmaker. It's what keeps me going.
Well, thank you for sharing that story. And I'm Devorah with you on the line. Let me just say, may your son's memory be a blessing. And we're so sorry to hear of that loss, your loss. Thank you, Oren. Let's talk about what it feels like coming home to Israel. And the film Hummus the movie was such a love letter to Israel. It was, it showed so many sides of Israeli society. And I'd love to hear what made you want to make a movie about hummus.
That's a great question, because as an Israeli, hummus is it's a major part of our life. I just have that hummus for breakfast today, and can't live without it. And I live in a village called Nataf, which is near Abu Ghosh. And in Abu Ghosh, they were competing with Lebanon for the Guinness Book of World Records for the biggest hummus plate. It was always in the background because I have to pass Abu Ghosh twice a day to get anywhere I'm going. And I always wanted to do a movie about this, hummus war between Israel and Lebanon, because finally it's a war that doesn't involve tanks and soldiers. It's a war about who has a bigger hummus plate. And that was the base of wanting to do this movie. And then the stars aligned, and one day the opportunity presented itself, and through a production company in Jerusalem, JU, I got this amazing chance to start exploring and going on this journey, starting in Abu Ghosh. And that was the initial how it all started. I went to Abu Ghosh and I met this guy, Abu Shukri, and he has a very famous Hummus plate. He recently passed away, but anyway, he told me that there was a big hummus competition in Israel for the Golden Pita Award. And there were many chefs. There was even a woman, he said. So I got really excited. The next day I went and looked for that woman, and that's how I met my Suhaila, my character in Akko. And one thing led to another, but it started in Abu Ghosh.
You didn't know when you met her that she would ultimately win the award that she won in the film, right?
Abu Shukri told me that he won the award, the Golden Pita Award. But as I walked into Suhaila's restaurant, I see on the wall an actual pita sprayed painted with gold paint, the Golden Pita Award. And then I knew, okay, maybe he wasn't completely honest with me, or his honor maybe prevented him from telling me that she actually won first place.
I see.
But that's all in the movie. And so very, and the nature of documentaries is that you never know what to expect. One thing leads to another. It's enough somebody tells you an interesting story, and then you go out and explore it, and maybe that becomes the highlight of the movie, and whatever you set out to do initially actually takes a side seat. And in this case, it was definitely that. I mean, from Abu Ghosh, it spread to Akko and to Ramle and to Jews and Christians and Muslims. And it was a very exciting journey for me as an Israeli to explore all this. I mean, I got to places that they didn't even know that there's Muslims and Christians living in Israel.
It sounds a little like there's some life lessons in making a documentary that you carry forward into your regular life of needing to be flexible and adaptable and ready for change, and a new direction presents itself. And I wonder perhaps if some of those experiences gave you some life skills during this special time that we're all experiencing around the world.
Yeah, the documentary is actually, it's taking a mirror and kind of putting it on society. Now, your personal interests are gonna determine where you point that mirror at, because this story is all around us. Interesting people, interesting stories, especially in Israel, which is like a pomegranate. Everywhere you throw a stone, you'll hit a very interesting story. There's always something to tell. If I had money, I would be making documentaries all day long.
You would interview every Israeli, huh?
Well, there's a story everywhere to be told.
Great way to see life. Can you tell us a little bit about each of those protagonists and how you found them? Can you talk to us about those? I mean, those are three really special people. They weren't kind of your average hummus maker, maybe. They were pretty spectacular and dramatic, which fit well for the making of a film.
Yeah, so I told you how I met Suhaila.
Yes.
It was via Abu Ghosh. So from Akko, after I had Suhaila, and I fell in love immediately with her and her sister Miriam and her mother and her whole story. So unusual, a Muslim woman succeeding on her own in the heart of a Arab market. There's a lot of politics there. There's people don't like them being successful. They're very modest, and I think that's what makes them special as well. If you're ever in Akko, you should definitely visit her. If you keep kosher, I mean, it might be a problem to eat there, but just go and say hi, tell them you saw the movie, and you'll see a smile that's priceless. Mm-hmm. That's Suhaila. She's just amazing. And I traveled with her and her sister Miriam through film festivals around the world, and everywhere we went. It was just extraordinary. Another character is Eliyahu from Hummus Eliyahu, who I know for many years. I knew him before he became a Breslev Chassid, and he was. I kept meeting him in different parts, different sections of my life. And then accidentally, I stopped there, and on the way from somewhere. At his place, he had one restaurant at the time. Today he has, I don't know, over 100. And we recognized each other, and I asked him, listen, tell me a little bit about your place. I mean, what's so special about it? How come there's so many people here? I had to stand in line for 30 minutes to get in, and I'm sitting in the table with people I don't even know. And he said that's the secret, that everybody comes in and sits together. It doesn't matter who they are. You see soldiers with Arabs, and everybody's just there for the hummus. So he immediately became somebody I wanted to come back and film with. And again, one thing led to another. And from there, I was actually looking initially to see, okay, what is the breakdown of hummus? Olive oil, right? You need olive oil to make hummus. I went to an olive oil press in a monastery in Latrun. And the guy there, when I was about to leave, said, if you're hungry, you should go to Ramlet for lunch. It's 10 minutes away, and there's the best hummus there. It's my cousin Jalil and Samir. Just tell them you're my friends and you were filming with me, the olive press. And we went there, and that was it. We met Samir and Jalil, and that's how I found another character. One thing leads to another. You never know when you start your day what you're going to do, and eventually in the edit room, you just have to piece it all together.
And so can you explain the sect of Judaism that Eliyahu is a part of? There's a question on our chat room asking about it. It's a Rastafarian group. You use another phrase, a Breslov. Can you explain what this is about?
Yeah, so there's a place in the Ukraine where a rabbi came from, Rabbi Nachman from Breslov, and he has many followers. His followers are divided into different sects. Some are more like Eliyahu. They believe in, it's kind of, I don't know how to describe it exactly, but they're called the Nachmans, because there was a note that was discovered in Tiberias according to tradition, and it said, and people said that this is the note from the rabbi, and it said Nachman, Uman, and Uman is the town in the Ukraine where Rabbi Nachman from Breslev is buried in, and they go there and worship his grave there a few times a year, especially in Rosh Hashanah. And this is the sect or the group of Chassids that Eliyahu is now connected to and believes in. It's controversial in many ways. People maybe agree or not agree with them, but this is what he chose. He was secular, and he became religious, and this is the path he chose. Like many Israelis, they choose it because of their happiness. These are the ones you see dancing around in the streets, and he's a happy guy, and Eliyahu, and his happiness comes out in the movie. I think you see it, and today he has a car that he sponsors of dancing chassids that drives around Israel and Tel Aviv and uplifts people. Even now in the Corona quarantine, they were driving down Tel Aviv and people were dancing in their balconies, and a lot of happiness in what they do.
Yeah, he certainly had a lot of positive energy kind of exuding out from him in the film. You could really feel that, even though there are screens between us. Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
You talk about the restaurateur who opened a branch in Germany. I forget his name now.
Jalil, yeah.
Right. Oh, okay, right. So in your experience for this film, you traveled to Germany because there's scenes in Germany, and you also traveled to Lebanon. Can you talk a little bit about your experience and getting film access in Lebanon?
Right. So the only time I was in Lebanon was between 1994 and 1999 when I was in the army. For this particular filming, I had a Palestinian Christian friend from Bethlehem that I sent to Lebanon. I arranged the interview in advance with the minister. And being Israeli, there's no way I could have done it. And I don't have any other passports. So, but he proved to be very useful for the movie. I didn't know what to expect, but I saw different interviews that he gave, and he was very passionate about hummus being a Lebanese dish, and he took it really personally. And I thought, okay, this is a guy I really want to interview, but how am I going to do that? So luckily, my Palestinian friend helped me out and went and did the interview, and I was asking the questions on the phone, and yeah, it turned out pretty cool.
So he acted like your surrogate, we would say. That's a really
Yeah. I mean, the Middle East is a complicated place. So when I do interviews in Iraq and Iran, I filmed different militias in Gaza. It's all by remote control, by local crews, or by friends that can travel there and get me what I need.
Right. And so with this way of filming, it creates a really driven story between different groups within Israel and different cultures within the Middle East. Was there anything that you took away in these kind of, I've heard a few life lessons, about adaptability and flexibility, and you never know how your day is going to end just because of one way it starts. All of these you've been sharing with us, these little pearls of wisdom that you've picked up along the way. As you think about your experiences across these different cultures and communities in the Middle East, are there other lessons or kind of messages that you've walked away with?
Yeah, I think the main message is that I get to see things that other Israelis don't see and experience. And I think the main thing that I have so many friends on Facebook and social media from Arab countries, many from Gaza as well. I have a connection to my neighbors and to the Arab world that ordinary Israelis don't have. And through my friends and through my connections there, I get to see that we're all the same, more or less. There's, everybody that wants to just, make a living, live, and have fun, and then there's others that, have a different agenda, and then there's, but when it comes down to it, there's a lot of hope, and sometimes not. So, I mean, we have, like with this quarantine issue, we have, times that we're hopeful and times that we're not. And Israel is like, it's constantly, there's a wave, we're going up and down with this situation, with our relationship with our neighbors. The close ones, the Palestinians, and also the ones that are more far away. And I hope one day that, we'll be able to meet my friends in Gaza and friends in other places, and not just meet them online, which is dangerous for them as well at the moment.
Mm. So I have a couple last questions about Hummus the movie, but I'm going to open it up to the group here. If anybody has questions and you haven't put them in the chat feature yet, and you want to raise your hand, I'm going to look for raised hands now. So give a little raise, give a little wave. Or just give a smile. I'll take those too. Thank you, Amy. Okay, so my last couple of questions around the hummus movie, Oren, are why do you think that hummus is such a popular food in the Middle East? You know, it comes from such humble ingredients. Why does it deserve the spotlight?
Oh, that's exactly why. It's a simple food. It's a staple food. It's somebody even that, you know, somebody who doesn't have any money, you know, can eat. You sit around and you eat it together with your hands. It's really and Israelis fell in love with it. I think in the 50s when they started putting canned hummus in in the army rations, and then it reached all the way to today where you have designated hummus places. I mean, it went from being a meze, a side dish, to the main dish. And Israelis adopted it as one of their main dishes, but also Palestinians, also Lebanese, also Syrians in Aleppo. Aleppo hummus is very famous. What makes it unique is because, you know, it's cheap. Everybody can make hummus. It's a breakfast food here. You eat it in the morning because it's very heavy. I mean, it keeps you going. You don't want to eat it in the afternoon or the evening because you might fall asleep after. So you eat it and it fills you up for the whole day and you're good to go. You know, and you eat a few falafels with it and a pita bread and you're stuffed for the rest of the day. And you only spent what, 15 shekels. So I think that's the popularity of it. In other countries, you have other cheap foods that are popular, and here it's hummus.
I like to talk about dumplings as an international food. I think every culture has a dumpling, and I think what you're saying is every culture also has a cheap and easy breakfast food to fill you up and keep you going for the day.
Right, right. You need that.
So my final question about hummus, and then we'll move on. And I do see the other questions. I'm saving some of them for another section of today's session. So thank you. Keep the questions coming. So who holds the title for the biggest hummus plate? That was a pretty big part of the film, or at least an entertaining part.
Yeah, well, Lebanon. At the moment, Lebanon holds the title. I'll tell you a little story. Before the movie, Hummus, the movie came out, I thought, okay, I want to promote the movie somehow. And I want to make, together with all my characters, with Suela, with Eliyahu, with Jalil, and with the guys in Abu Ghosh, a hummus dish that will break the Lebanese record. And everything was in place. We had brand new cement trucks from the port in Haifa that were going to make the hummus. Had donations from everywhere. And then all that was missing was a judge from Guinness to come in and watch over it and give us the title. So I approached Guinness in London, and they refused to come, stating that Israel was too dangerous to travel, and according to traveling from their minister of whatever, they're not allowed to travel there at the moment. And it was completely not true, but I had to accept it as a fact. And so they didn't show up, and that didn't happen. So yeah, Lebanon still holds the record, and I know that the guy in Abu Ghosh is trying to beat it again. We'll see what happens.
So from a modest food made of simple pedestrian ingredients to a competitive edge with fire and fury behind it, you've given us a good taste of the film, and the film has given us a great insight into not just Israeli culture, but food cuisine and stories from the Muslim community, the Christian community, the Jewish community, and beyond Israel in other parts of the Middle East. So thank you for all of that, Oren. Are there any last words you'd like to share about Hummus the movie before we move on to a discussion about the real Fauda?
Yeah, well, Hummus the movie is I made it a few years ago, and I think it's priceless because timeless, because it speaks about food. And hummus, when I started it, was a phenomenon, but now it's like it's just became part of pop culture in Israel. I mean, hummus is what tourists come here to eat. I mean, first the beach, then hummus, or the other way around. But hummus is always going to be a part of somebody's visit to Israel. So I'm happy I got to make a movie called Hummus the Movie.
Fantastic. We're happy you did too. Thank you so much for all of that. So to transition to a much more serious topic, and one that delves deeply into the Palestinian-Israeli conflict, we're going to move now in our conversation to talk about the BBC documentary film that you made called The Real Fauda, a behind-the-scenes look at season 2. Yes? For those who may not have seen the film, is there a brief commentary you'd like to give about it before we dive a little deeper?
So I don't know if everybody's familiar with the series, but Fauda here was a big success, and season 1 really touched many people, Israelis and Palestinians, and became hugely popular in the Arab world, which is surprising for an Israeli show to be popular in the Arab world, especially with the situation of boycotts and other things that are going on now. That was the base of what I wanted to explore, and I went with this idea to the BBC in London, and they said, okay, this is a great idea, but take it to BBC Arabic. So I actually got the movie commissioned through BBC Arabic, and the first version I made was in Arabic. But then it got millions of hits, and they wanted an English version as well, and that's how I got to do an English version as well, and that was aired on BBC World Service quite a few times.
And tell me, I heard it in the film, but what does Fauda mean?
Fauda in Arabic means chaos. And it's a word, a code word that that is used when a special operations unit is being, who is working undercover as being, for some reason or another, exposed. And they have to fight their way or shoot their way out. They yell Fauda, Fauda, and then chaos starts. And in this chaos, you can actually, maybe if you're lucky, escape from that situation. And I'm talking about a whole village waking up and shooting and stones and what we call in Israel a big balagan.
We often use that word here too. I think it has bridged the gap over to English as well. So I want to talk about how you had access to dangerous areas, including the West Bank, to do this. Should we say a few words first, or should we share our photos with the group now?
Yeah, let's share the photos. I can speak over the photos.
Okay, perfect. So I'm going to share my screen now with everyone. Let's see. Can you all see the photos? Yes.
Yeah. So in this photo, I wanted to, in the movie, because it's called The Real Fauda, where I went behind the scenes of the making of season 2. And I, for the first time, filmed with the actual unit it's based on, the undercover unit. But I needed the Palestinian side. And I was trying for months to locate some armed Hamas members, to interview them, to ask them what they think about this series, Fauda. And I went to Balata refugee camp and waited, and me and Jane that was there with me, Jane Corbin. We were taking from one house to the other, and eventually it didn't happen. And then one day I got a call from an Arab producer that I work with, Moral, and she said, "Oren, come fast to Jerusalem. We may be able to interview these Hamas guys. They're armed, and they're in a refugee camp near Ramallah. So we have to be quick." And I grabbed my camera, the one you see in the picture, and picked up Moral in the old city in Jerusalem, and we drove through a checkpoint into a refugee camp called the Sharafat refugee camp, which is just north of Jerusalem, of the French Hill, between Jerusalem and Ramallah. And once we crossed the checkpoint, we stopped, and Moral called her contact, and they told us to wait there. And then after a few minutes, the back door opened, and a 10-year-old kid jumped in, and in Arabic said, you know, go this way, and showed us the way in the refugee camp. And I'm trying to remember where I'm going. Okay, here's a UN school. Here's a shop with Coca-Cola, just to remember where I'm going. So if I need to get out of there, I'll have a few points that I can either tell, you know, somebody, listen, this is where I am. So at some point, I didn't know where I was anymore. And we reached this alley, and this, we got out. Somebody came in my car and parked it for me. And they took us up to the second story house that you see here in the picture. And the door was locked. We were inside. And then these two guys showed up with duffel bags, took out these guns, and I had this amazing opportunity to film them. My heart was beating. Here I am with two Hamas guys in the middle of a refugee camp. There's no way I can be saved or rescued. I just have to, you know, use one of my hats. This one was the BBC hat. You know, it's actually a Toronto Blue Jays hat, and I played, you know, this was my job there. I was under the protection of being a BBC filmmaker. And I asked the guy on the right of your screen holding the pistol, you know, to tie his keffiyeh, and the other guy to, you know, to take out, you know, his magazine. I needed to shoot some B-roll in order to connect it to the interview that I'm going to do with them later. So the guy on the right, and I know you can tell from the picture, you see he has a little white patch on his hand. So I'm filming, and then at some point he comes up to me and says, stop, erase everything. And I think, okay, that's it, I'm dead. You know, they're on to me. Something's going really wrong. I had to keep cool and smile and pretend I don't understand what's going on. And then I asked him, he said, I have to take my little band off. He had a little, because I work in a hotel in Jerusalem, and I'm afraid somebody will recognize me from that band. So I had to show him I'm erasing all the footage and start over. And I'm thinking, oh my God, this guy is working in a hotel in Jerusalem, and on his other job, he's a terrorist. It's pretty unnerving. So that was part of this behind the scene story of what was going on here. And then when we finished, you know, they're posing with their guns, and I'm posing with my little camera. It was unnerving, very unnerving situation.
Yeah, clearly this was a high stress experience. So I will also just give a little, you know, warning to our audience that I found some of these photos very stressful, to say the least. So this is photo one. Let's move to photo two. We on photo two now? Okay.
Right. So this is the actual interview where we went to the next room where there was already a flag on set up behind them. And where I'm sitting with my camera on a tripod in front of them, and Morale, the producer and the translator, was next to me. They both understood English and spoke English, but chose to do it in Arabic. And I asked them, you could see in the movie also, I mean, what they think about this series, and are they afraid from this unit that and they were obviously, they gave me, the answer I expected people holding guns to give me. So you have to watch the movie to see what they said, but so that all went well as well, this interview.
Okay, and so let's look at photo number 3 then. Oops, sorry. How do I? There we go. This is the one that was most upsetting to me, as you can probably imagine why.
Right. So this is actually the unit. It's called the Hummus, Yechidat Mistaravim, which Fauda is based on. In reality, this unit is made up of people who go undercover and just dress, like Arabs or ordinary people. You can never tell they're soldiers. But another half of the unit is like this, and they're in uniform, and they are considered the best sniper unit in the world, according to different publications. You could Google it. And here I am with their snipers. You could see there's a silencer at the end of their sniper rifles. And they're very, very, very skilled snipers. And I saw them in action. And for this particular shot, there's a bullet in the chamber there. And they're both really fixed on their targets. And I could somehow get in front of them to get this shot and then move out of their way. But I trusted them completely. So their job is really to go in and support the units that are working undercover. They could be anywhere. They go, they hide in trees, they're in trucks, in cars. You don't know they're there, but they're the ones, and you could see in the series Fauda, that give that support to the troops that are on the ground and have no protection.
Can you talk a little bit about, thank you for showing us all of these photos. I'm gonna stop sharing these so we can continue our conversation. Can you talk about the Arab actors and their sense of danger? You experienced a sense of danger visiting the West Bank and Gaza. Tell us about their experience being in an Israeli film, show series.
So the show is all shot in Israel, all shot in Arab Israeli towns like Kfar Qasem, which is just 15 minutes north of Tel Aviv. The actors themselves, the Arab Israeli actors, they have a big problem with playing in an Israeli series that deals with the Israeli army and undercover and violence and the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, because they have to go back to their communities and then explain, that they're not traitors, that they're just actors, that this is art. But it doesn't matter, because not everybody understands that in their society. So some of them refused to actually be interviewed for my movie, because of that fear, and just said, listen, this was a role I did and I moved on. And on the other hand, like Hisham, Suleiman, and others, they had no fear, because they saw this as being the role of their lives that actually made them famous and got them more work. So it was divided between those two. These two groups, the ones that were happy to speak and this promoted their career, and the ones that were like, okay, I did this, I hope nobody remembers, and I'm going to move on. So that was the Arab Israelis in the show reaction to this. And the other actors are mainly from the actual unit that Fauda is based on. So Lior and Avi, the writers, and Lior, the main actor, Lior Raz, both served in this unit in the West Bank. And Nimrod and many of the other extras and the ones that trained them in the behind the scenes and for all the different scenes that involve shooting and going undercover, all the extras also were from the unit. So they had to always step back not to reveal the real methods of operation because it was just too real. Everything they did from holding the guns and is real. It's not Hollywood actors. It's not actors acting out shooting scenes and techniques of surveillance, and it's all very real. And when I asked the commander of the unit if this hurt them in their operations, do they have to adapt now to all their secrets have been revealed? He said, "Don't worry, we're already many stages beyond that." But so it's very, very, very real to the point that they have to step back a bit.
That's so interesting. I mean, certainly it gives the series such an authentic feel, but it is current real life. So it's very interesting for that to be an area of exploration for entertainment.
Yes, for entertainment and not for filmmaking, because when I went to get that interview, I was a Fauda. But I had no backup. I had no snipers. I was on my own. So it was one of the, I don't know if the stupidest things I did, but it's way up there in the dangerous things I had to do as a filmmaker.
So someone in our group observed that you seem to be attracted to these groups of conflicts and areas of conflict, and wondered if you feel like you have some kind of personal mission to explore different groups and areas of conflict.
I don't know if it's a mission. I think it's probably PTSD from my army service. After serving in South Lebanon, which we just marked here in Israel 20 years for leaving South Lebanon. After 20 years, 2000 we left. I was serving there in my army service between 94 and 98. Lost many friends, and it was a war with no name. In South Lebanon, we were fighting Hezbollah, and I spent all my service there as a soldier and then as a commander of the Special Forces unit. And I think that experience of being there never left me. Some people call it post-trauma, PTSD. For me, I just deal with it I dealt with it by becoming a photojournalist, and then the second Palestinian Intifada broke out, and I was running from one bomb to another, from one event to another, and then continued covering the news events here. And so I've always been, a major element of my life is news coverage as well. So moving into doing documentaries about these subjects for me is very natural. It's my cup of tea. I'm not.
Yes. Okay. I mean, I think that in the real Fauda, Lior also talks about he was using his own personal experience and trauma in the army to develop this show. And he described, right, how making the show became a cathartic experience for him, right? So it sounds similar.
Yeah, I mean, everybody in Israel probably has post-trauma to a certain degree. I mean, everybody who serves in the army doesn't come back the same. And in Israel, sometimes it's more calm, sometimes it's an actual war, or it's never quiet. So yeah, I can relate to that. I mean,
Right.
me and Lior are good friends, so we had these conversations.
Mm-hmm. So one of our members asked if you've ever wanted to make a documentary showing a happy coexistence, a peaceful experience. Specifically, they asked between Israelis and Palestinians.
It's a good question, and of course, that's my greatest passion. I mean, after seeing war, is trying to promote peace. War is not good, and war everybody loses. There's no winners ever, and especially in an ongoing conflict that doesn't really have a solution, like us and the Palestinians. We're both fighting for the same piece of land, for Jerusalem. Nobody's going to give that up. So this conflict is never going to be resolved. So the only thing that we could do is lower the flame a bit and keep it livable, the situation livable, but it's always going to go up and down. Having said that, so I made this meeting where I took 3 young Israelis and 3 young Palestinians. I had to smuggle the Palestinians through the checkpoints to a hotel in Jerusalem, the American colony, when I sat them all down to speak. So 1 right-wing Israeli, 1 left-wing, and 1, I'd say, center. And from the Palestinians, 1 who, all young, all in their 20s. 1 that her brother was in Hamas, was killed by the Israelis. Another, but she wants peace. She's from Nablus. She's the one I had to smuggle into Israel to do this, because they would never give her a permit to come into Israel because she's too young, and had the brother who was killed by the Israelis, a Hamas member, so she's marked as a terrorist. And then I took this other girl from actually from East Jerusalem, that her stories, or her father was killed in the checkpoint. The Israeli version is that he tried to run over soldiers and he was shot and killed. Her version is that he was on the way home to her and mother and her brothers, and it happened on the way there, and he's not a terrorist. So very interesting characters. Put them all in one room and had them speak to each other. And it was very surprising. I mean, to see how they have so much in common, and it gave hope in a way. Yeah.
Do you feel like their age has something to do with that ability to build bridges?
It's hard to tell. I think at some point, this conflict has been going on for so long that, just being young and happy and wanting, is not enough. There's also an element of religion in both societies that makes this all, puts it all on another level of, religious war, this is ours, this is ours. It's really difficult. I don't see a solution, really, unfortunately, to this situation. I'm just seeing whoever can get along should, and maybe they will move the ones that don't want to get along further away. But I'm very naive, probably, deep down inside, I don't actually believe this because I've just seen so much bloodshed.
I understand. Well, it sounded like Fauda was popular not only in Israel, but also perhaps among maybe not popular. Tell me about the reaction of Palestinians if they experienced that they viewed the show and what their reaction was to the show.
So in the documentary, you could see that we go to Zacharias Beatty, who was a commander of a very notorious terror group in the Second Intifada in Jenin refugee camp. And he killed many Israelis. He's in prison now because a few months after we interviewed him, the Secret Service arrested him with a weapon, and accused him of conducting a drive-by shooting on soldiers near Ramada. He's now in prison. But when I sat with him in the movie to interview him, I was in his house, then walked around with him in the refugee camp, and yeah, it's sorry.
No, it's okay.
I kind of drifted away there, but yeah, I mean, when they saw Fauda, their reaction was basically that, we're better than the Israelis; they will never get us, and we're learning all their moves. Also, we're not afraid of them.
Right.
That was their message from watching this. But I think really they are afraid because they can't trust anybody. They can't trust anybody sitting next to them. They can't trust their own brothers. They can't trust their own sisters or mothers or fathers. It's a fear that's there all the time. And so I don't really believe that I think it's a show they put on to say that they're not afraid, but they really are. I would be.
Mm-hmm. And you had a taste of that kind of fear in many segments of your life, but as you just described, that first visit to the refugee camp was a chance to also feel that sense of fear, and I think fear can drive a lot in this world. Well, you have given us so much information and so much background and insight, and you have been so generous with your time. And I recognize that it's very late in Israel, or getting late in Israel. So I want to soon wrap up. I want to scan the audience again to see if there are anybody who would like to raise their hand. Oh, I see Carol. I see you. 1 second. If I unmute you, let's see if it needs to accept it. Carol, go ahead. Thank you.
Hi, thanks for talking to us today, Oren. I've been a devoted follower of Fauda. I've watched all of it. And I just said, did I understand this right when you say that the guys who play the Fauda people and some of the ladies who are very tough to play Fauda are really Fauda members, not trained actors who act in other things? Did I get that right? Because they're awfully good as actors.
Yeah. So in Israel, everybody has to go to the army, girls and boys.
Yes, right.
And so to answer your question, yes. Specifically in this series, I'd say 70% of the actors and the writers all served not only in the army, but in the actual unit that this show is based on.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah. So
but they're all good actors.
What you see is real. Completely real.
Wow. That's amazing. It's a great show. Great series.
Yeah, so you saw season 3 also?
Oh, yes. And I'm telling you, I don't know how they never, I sit there and people have to have, the guys who do this and the ladies I've seen them obviously in the unit too, have to have nerves of pure steel and no fear, because I'm sitting there terrified watching this and saying, oh God, what happens? By the way, I cried at the end. I didn't see that coming. I don't want to be a spoiler alert.
I think everybody did. Yeah.
I was like, no. So it's a great show.
It's a great show. Yeah, it's kind of hard to see them making season 4 after the ending of 3, but we'll see.
Thank you, Carol. Are there others who'd like to raise their hand? Oh, I saw someone. Linda G. Go ahead.
Well, I'm going to get back to the subject of the hummus.
Yes.
To ask earlier. Are you familiar with the Israeli that started a restaurant in Philadelphia, a hummus restaurant, and that's very popular? I think we had him for the book club one time. We read his book and his recipes. Solomon, his last name. And are you familiar with him? He's become quite popular. And the restaurant is a very popular restaurant, I think. Right now it's probably closed, but I just wondered if you have heard of him.
Yeah, I heard of him. He was actually in Israel, and he did a tour here. And but yeah, hummus is so popular. I mean, it's if you open it, I just got a message from a friend from the embassy, the Israeli embassy in India. And they said, listen, we contact you because you made the movie about hummus, but there's an Indian guy, very rich Indian guy, and he wants to open a hummus place, a chain in India. Can you give him suggestions? You know, who should he speak to? So hummus is a world phenomenon.
Universal food.
Universal, yeah, yeah. But you know, it's claimed by all and owned by none. Everybody claims it's, you know, the Lebanese claim it as their national food, the Israelis, the Syrians, the Egyptians. But it's, you know, it's an international
This
dish.
morning, I had some hummus for lunch. Some hummus.
Yes, thank you.
I had hummus for breakfast.
Right. We should follow this program with a cooking demonstration. Yes, that's fabulous. All right, I'm going to look for, I think we have one last question. I know we've gone over time, but I figured we're on Zoom. If you had somewhere else to go, you could go somewhere else. I was enjoying the conversation, so I hope you are happy for me to indulge you in more dialogue with Oren, having gone over time. Let me just look and scan if there's any last question. We'll take one last question. Okay, good. Well, this has just been absolutely wonderful, Oren. Thank you so much for sharing your expertise, your experience, and your time with us. If you'd like to clap, here's how to clap on Zoom while you're muted. Sign language, everyone. Do you see the love, Oren? They want to show you the love, and they're upset I'm not unmuting them.
Thank you.
Hi, Shai. I see you now. I missed you before. We gave a shout out to all of our publicity partners earlier. I'll do it again now as I just see Shai from Virginia. Hi. The Pozaz JCC of Northern Virginia, and to Barbara, the JCC of Rockland. We also had Beth Havarim, Shir Shalom on our publicity partners, as well as the Glen Rock Jewish Center. So wide variety of partners who brought us all together to listen to Oren's stories today. And I appreciate you sharing your afternoon with us. Oren, any final words?
Yeah, I just want to share with you a few projects I'm working on now.
Oh, yes, please. Everyone has asked. Yes, please do.
Okay, so one that is now in the oven and is almost ready is called Converts. And I am doing it with Rebecca Shore. We're co-directing it together, co-producing it for the past few years. And we spotlight different individuals in different countries, in Poland and in Canada and Costa Rica, that decided that they want to join the club, become Jewish for different reasons. And again, the nature of a documentary is that you start it with an idea, but then it leads you to other places. So it led me to medieval Spain and to other exciting places. And it's called Converts, and it's going to be coming out soon.
Fantastic. Well, thank you for sharing that with us. And again, we thank everyone for coming together with us, for showing so much interest in Israeli film and stories and Middle Eastern stories that help us travel around the world, especially when we can't even leave our houses, perhaps.